नमस्कार दोस्तों, स्वागत है आपका एक बार फिर से इस YouTube चैनल पर। और आज मैं आपके लिए पढ़ने वाला हूँ बुक चिकन सूप फॉर द कपल सोल। तो चिकन सूप फॉर द कपल सोल के चैप्टर 1 का आज हम पढ़ने वाले हैं। एक और अध्याय जो कि है एन ईरिस लव स्टोरी। लेट मी कॉल हिम यान, दैट्स नॉट हिज रियल नेम. But in Northern Ireland these days, you have to be careful about revealing names. There have been more than 2,400 sectarian murders since the recent flare-up of ancient revolts between Catholics and Protestants. So there is no sense taking risk. And Ian has had misery enough for his 24 years of life. He came from good Protestant stock, the sort that goes to church twice every Sunday as regular as clockwork. His father, a welder in the Belfast shipyards, steady as they come. Mother kept a clean and tidy house, baked the best bread in the neighborhood, and ruled the family with the sharp edge of her tongue. Two elder brothers, both unemployed laborers. Ian did well at school and was now earning good money as a craftsman in a production plant. Quite serious, fond of walking through the countryside during the green evenings and golden weekends of summer. He liked few things better than a book by the roaring fire during the long loneliness of winter. Never had much to do with the girlfriends though men tend to marry late in Ireland. 2 years ago, on his 22nd birthday, he was walking home from work when a terrorist hurled a bomb from a speeding car and left Ian babbling in the nightmare of sudden blindness. He was rushed to a hospital, operated on immediately for internal injuries and broken bones, but both eyes were destroyed. The other wounds healed in their own time, though their scars would disfigure his flesh the rest of his days. But the scars on his mind, though invisible, were even more obvious. He hardly spoke a word, hardly ate or drank, hardly slept. He simply lay in bed, brooding and sightless, nearly 4 months. There was one nurse who seemed to be able to draw some small spark of human response from him. Let's call her Bridget. A fine Irish name. Good Catholic stock, the sort that goes to mass first thing every Sunday morning. Her father, a carpenter, mostly worked away from home over in England. A decent man, loved his family, spent weekends with them whenever he could afford the fare, and they loved him as only an absent father can be loved. Mother kept a clean but untidy house, cooked the best stew in the neighborhood, and ruled the family with a quick hand and a soft heart. 6 brothers, 4 sisters, with the youngest of them all, Mary, 11, her father's darling. Bridget did well at school, had trained as a nurse at a famous London hospital, and now at the age of 21 was a staff nurse in Belfast's biggest hospital. Lively though fundamentally serious, a singer with a sweet and gentle voice and a way of her own with folk songs. Never had much to do with boyfriends, though it was not from any lack of young men who do set their caps at her. But now her heart was moved by Ian, for there was something of the little boy lost about him that brought tears to her eyes. True, he could not see the tears, yet she was afraid that her voice would betray her emotions. In a way, she was right about her voice, because it was the lilt and the laughter of it that dragged him back from the depth of depression and self-pity. The warmth and gentleness and strength of her words, the blessed assurance with which she spoke to him of the love and Jesus Christ. And so, as the long dark of his days turned to weeks and months, he would listen for her footstep and turns his sightless face towards her, coming like a flower bending for the sun. At the end of his 4 months in the hospital, he was pronounced incurably blind. But what he now knew as their love gave him the courage to accept his affliction, because despite everything against them, religion, politics, the opposition of their families, they were in love and wandering in that young and singing landscape. He was discharged and began the very months of rehabilitation. How to wash and shave and dress without help. How to move around the house without cracking his shins on every chair. How to walk through the streets with a white stick. How to read Braille. How to survive the crushing pity he could sense in the very air he breathed. Their love gave him the hope to go living and trying. Not that they were able to spend much of their lives together. An occasional evening, perhaps an afternoon, when her duty allowed, but they lived for those brief encounters and knew the beginnings of deep peace and joys. Their families were appalled, thinking of getting married. The very law of God forbade it surely. What fellowship hath the children of light with the children of darkness? Thundered his father. He will not be marrying her wish list. I am drawing breath. The Roman Catholic Church stated her prized, discourage mixed marriages. So you can putting the idea from you. So by all manners of pressures, constant arguments, threats, promises, and even downright lies, they were driven apart. And eventually they quarreled, said hurtful things in their black misery, and one evening with the rain drizzling and their hearts cold, she walked away from him on the weeping streets. He withdrew into his perpetual night. Days and weeks of bitterness. He will not be regretting it in the long run, he was told. He would have been inviting trouble by yoking with an unbeliever. She withdrew into her work, too sick at heart to remember. Weeks and months of numbed agony. You will live to praise the Almighty, she was told. He would have been asking for hell on earth, marrying on a Protestant. The months drained into a year, and the bombings continued, to the grief of Ireland. Then one evening, and Ian sat alone in the house. There came a frantic hammering at the door. Ian, come you quick. By the voice, hysterical, choked with tears, he recognized young Mary, Bridget's sister. A bombing. She's trapped and half dead. So she is screaming after you. Come you, Ian, in the name of God, please come. Without even shutting the door behind him, he took her hand, and she led and stumbled and cried with him through the merciless street. The bomb had devastated a little restaurant where Bridget had been eating supper with 3 other nurses. The other had managed to scramble out from under the shifting rubble, but she was trapped by the legs, and the fire was spreading, licking towards her. They could hear her screaming, but could not yet reach the pit where she lay. Firemen, soldiers, light and special equipment were on the way. Ian moved into the chaos. You can't go in there, shouted the official in charge. She's my girl, said Ian. Don't be a raving lunatic, shouted the officer. You will not be seeing your hand in front of your face in the darkness. What difference does darkness make to blind men? Asked Ian. And he turned toward the sound of her voice and moved through that black inferno with all the skills and instincts of the blind, all the urgency of love. I'm coming, Bridget, I'm coming. And he found her, cradled her head in his yearning arms and kissed her. Jan, she whispered, Jan, and lapsed into unconsciousness like a tired child. And with her blood soaking into his clothes, the fire reaching them, he held her until their rescues chopped a way through what he didn't see. Being blind was that the side of her lovely face had been seared by fire. In time, a long time, she recovered. Despite cosmetic surgery, though her face would always be sacred. But she said, the only man I love will never have the seeing of it. So what difference does it make to me? And they took up their love from where they had never really left it. True, both families fought it every step of the way. One dramatic confrontation almost led to a first fight, shouted abuse, insults, desperate threats. But in the middle of it, Bridget took Jan's hand, and together they walked out of that place of hatred. Yes, they would marry. All the conventional wisdom warns of failures. But do you know a more excellent way than love? And what other healing is there? So that's all guys about this love story. So मैं मिलता हूँ आपसे अगले वीडियो में. जब तक के लिए आप अपना बहुत बहुत ख्याल रखें और खुश रहें. मैं मिलता हूँ आपसे अगले वीडियो में. थैंक यू.